Well, with me in studio at the end of a momentous week in South African politics, on business this week, and most of the business was politics, we have Daryl Glazer, lecturer in political studies at Wits University, and Sia Beniza, who is director at Rethink Africa. Something that struck me this afternoon, Daryl, we've been so focused on these metros, where the contest is so tight. There's still a national government which is dominated by the ANC. ANC policy, ANC practices, ANC cadre deployment, whatever. And the provinces, most of them, except for the Western Cape. So now we have the prospect of a national government running to this ANC agenda that is well established, even where it is schizophrenic, it is different ANCs. And now we have possibility of the big cities. The ANC can't call the shots. Do we have the possibility of strife between the big metros that are the economic engines of the country and the central government?
I think some strife is inevitable. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily going to be catastrophic because the ANC has got a kind of complicated investment in the whole thing. They don't want their cities to collapse either. And Cape Town has managed to get by despite the strife you talk about. But undoubtedly there are going to be tensions. Let's not forget that already, even without the political aspect to it, there are all sorts of blurrings of the line between the functions and powers of different levels of government. Cooperative governments doesn't always work well. So I can see two new axes of tension developing. One is exactly the one you described between centre and the metropoles, and the other is between cities and the rural areas. I don't know exactly what this portends. I mean, obviously Zuma is someone who appeals to the rural areas, and the ANC seems to be falling back on a rural base. Is there going to be future strife between urban and rural?
Yeah. Of course, the critics of President Zuma have said that it's not just him, it's not because he's got a warm personality, it's that there are patronage networks that have been established, and they would like to keep them. Sia?
Yeah, I think Daryl brings an interesting point, especially if you look at some of the rural areas or even semi-urban areas that are closely linked to the big metros that the ANC is losing. What's going to be the future of that? But I think generally the tension between sort of local government or provincial government and the centre is very isolated. I mean, we're very strong institutions such as the Municipal Finance Management Act and Public Finance Management Act, which stipulate and create very little room actually for sort of political interference at that level. And that's exactly how the Western Cape has been able to survive, despite what one might perceive as a sort of political tension between the centre and local government. Also,
the Western Cape, we must remind ourselves, has increased the DA's proportion of the vote. I think the last I looked was from around 60 to 63, 64. So there's the endorsement from the Western Cape of the DA's government, certainly in the city of Cape Town today. As I said, the other winner in this election, Julius Malema the one, and Mmusi Maimane is the other, and here's what he had to say a little earlier.
I'm glad that I can sit here and reflect on what our results are. And yesterday it became quite clear that NMB would become the biggest party there. And today it's become quite clear that we'll probably be the biggest party here in Tshwane.
So the numbers coming out from Tshwane, we're still waiting on the final tally. But at the last figure that I have is 42.3%. Has that changed? The ANC seems to be at 42.7%?
Well, it will continue to change because there's still a number of VDs coming through. So what we've worked with is making sure that we can look at the projections going forward. So those figures would have been about an hour and a half ago. So we've had to check and keep updating the system because it becomes absolutely critical that we can project so that we can continue our work.
Right. Of course, we're still waiting for Tshwane. Let's go to Johannesburg, where for the most part of the day, Mmusi, the fight has been neck and neck, or the race has been neck and neck with the ANC. What are your forecasts and projections telling you about the city of Johannesburg?
Well, we'll see what happens there, but what's important is that at least in a democratic South Africa, for the first time, no party can say they will get over 50% in Johannesburg. The ANC used to be able to comfortably get that, and I think that has changed. And I think that's a significant moment in our democracy, and we'll see what happens after that.
Certainly significant, but certainly also ushering us into an era of more coalitions than we've previously used to. Now, coalition is perhaps the big word that has been buzzing the whole day today. Let's take a look at Johannesburg. Are you in conversations with any of the smaller parties about partnering together there?
I'm awaiting to see what the final results will be tomorrow, and then we'll take action from there. As you know, when NMB was declared, I then was able to speak to General Bantu Holomisa to discuss the issue, and then today we'll be able to see what happens afterwards with all the other projections that are there.
Undeniably one of the winners of this election, the leader of the DA. Sia, we haven't heard too much about the percentage poll, which is the percentage of people who voted as a percentage of the total number registered. Last time it was 57. Daryl, you said while we were off air, you think it's about the same this time?
It's like maybe a percentage point or two up.
Yeah. Now that's actually very good. If you remember the very bad old days when there were only white elections, municipal elections for whites, the percentage poll in an election like this would be 10%, 12%. This is pretty high. So how would you assess the apathy versus interest in this election?
Sure. I also think this election happens on the back of currently very difficult economic environment. And we even seen the revolt that came out after the parties announced their certain candidates for mayoral canvassing. But beyond that, I think the turnout has been driven by this sort of anxiety and this sort of frustration that people feel in this difficult economic environment. Also, obviously, government has got its back up against the ropes, given that there's very little fiscal space. Generally, that really is what moves people, especially at the provincial and local elections level, because the vote is very tied to a real economic reality that they live on a daily.
And people talk about service delivery. That's another way of saying what you say. It's where things happen.
Yes,
National government doesn't collect your rubbish. So is there, I mean, I've heard people say, there's so many people who didn't vote. Well, but this is true in all democracies except Australia, where they force you to, or they fine you if you don't.
Yes, I mean, we don't have a particularly serious problem. What we have seen, unfortunately, nationally and locally, is a gradual decline in the percentage of the eligible population that is registered and that in turn votes in elections. We've held steady here in terms of municipal elections, gone slightly up probably from the last election in terms of percentage of registered
Well, that's
who,
good.
who are voting. And internationally for local elections, it's not bad at all. But I suppose part of what is also driving people to the polls is just the sheer interest value and excitement value of some of the contests going on.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to end it there, I'm afraid. It's been a fascinating week with the politics. Not quite finished yet, because we've got a look at the social media and how the social media is becoming both a reflection and a predictor of political activity in a way that political scientists perhaps haven't yet quite got to grips with. Daryl Glaser is lecturer for political studies at Wits University, and Sia Beniza is director at Rethink Africa. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us.